Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Practitioner's Workshop. It's been a very long time since I've posted anything. I've been very busy trying to accomplish the task and learn how it's all done. Apologize again for the wind. I can't turn off the ventilation. I have to keep that going in this here workshop. So I hope everybody's doing well. The couple things I wanted to cover. The work of alchemy is to work inside of the atom, not just on the outside of the atom. Modern science, the work, chemistry as a rule, doesn't penetrate the atom. That's just, they don't believe that it can be done in a wet chemical process, and so because they don't believe it can be done, they don't try it, and so as a result they create their own destiny. The work inside of the atom, no matter how you come at it, is atomic science. It's atomic physics. But when you think of an atom, though, try and think of terms of the periodic table. When they have an element and they give you the atomic orbital shells of that element, you're gonna have 2, 8, 18, 31, like 2, 8, 18, 2, or 1. And each of those numbers is called an orbital shell, and the number represents the number of electrons present in that orbital shell, and they presume that you already know that there's an equal amount of protons present. And so each element is a stack of orbital shells. They all start with the number 2, 2, 8, 18, 2, 8, 18, 18, 32, the 18, 1 is gold. And the only difference between one and another is that one has more layers, or the number will be higher in the layers than it is in the other one. But the substance from which they are built is the same. It's protons and electrons. This being the case, I want you to take into consideration what is a proton, okay? A proton is H2, okay? Meaning it's hydrogen. Not just one, it's 2 hydrogen. It's a wet substance. It's a wet thing. And if all of the elements are made out of layers of protons and electrons stacked on each other, is it not logical to conclude that the elements themselves were born in a wet process? The process of protonation is rather simple, and we use it all the time in things like sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is used as a proton donator. Like it will donate its H2s to something else if you put it in there if the sulfuric acid is wet. If it's dry, it'll take the H2s away from something. It'll do the opposite. And so every single element is stacks of the same things, either in greater quantities, lesser quantities, or different orders. And what modern science doesn't understand is that the basic foundation of all of that is the proton. The electron is the activity of the thing. It's what gives it its weight. It's what makes it alive. And if all elements are built out of electrons and protons, and they all have activity, they're all alive. So then how did the alchemists do all this work inside of an atom without being radiated? Because how can you work inside of an atom without working with radiation? Is that not what electrons are? To understand this, you have to understand radiation itself. And it's a salt. It truly is a salt. If you decay an element, the first thing to come out is the radiation, the salt. There's different forms of radiation. There's alpha, beta, gamma, as modern science calls it, or antimatter, dark matter, and matter. But they also don't understand that there's also radiant and ionic. It's a salt. Every salt can be adjusted in size when it's suspended in solution by changing the pH. And so if you change the pH of the solution, then the radiation becomes ions instead of, because a radiant form is a thing in an extremely small particle. It's so small it'll pass through everything. Whereas an ion is a little bit bigger and it won't pass through everything. An example of ionic radiation is chlorine. People don't realize it, but chlorine is actually radiation. And it's the radiation that comes from salt, and it's made by the electrical decay of sodium. And because it's done in water, it protonates the radiation, and they make ionic radiation. And the alchemists, they knew that radiation too, and they called it the substance of cancer. Represented by the crab and the zodiac, and they would have never ever drank tap water that had the substance of cancer in it, because they would have immediately spat it out saying, you can't drink that, it has cancer in it. If you drink that, you'll get cancer. Ionic radiation is still radiation, but it's not passing through everything. It's not active like radiant radiation is. And so it makes it safe to handle. It's still a serious thing, like chlorine is a serious thing. It's a radiation. It's an ionic radiation, which means it can be handled, but it still has its dangers, because no matter how you look at it, it's still a form of radiation. And so each of the orbital shells of an element is made by a form of protonated radiation, because the proton is there and the electrons are there, and this is how it's born, basically. And the problem that modern science has is that they're constantly trying to mimic what happens in a supernova. Well, the elements here on Earth are born in the Earth, in the tectonic zones, in the volcano. And so all the elements that are born in a supernova are all radioactive, because the things that are in the supernova are the most volatile aspects of the thing. And so every element produced by a supernova is radioactive and unusable. And so by mimicking a supernova, every element created in a particle accelerator is also radioactive and unusable. And so they spend trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to make products they can't do anything with, because they're looking too far from home. They need to be looking inside the volcano to understand how things work. And the concept, like, elements are made out of protons. How can they not see that they would inevitably have to be born in a bath of protons for that to be the case? And the protons would have to be irradiated by different forms of ionic radiation. And then that would have to be atomized. And so they're looking too far from home, basically, is what it is. If you truly want to understand the alchemist's work, you have to understand the atom. Because all of the work of the alchemist, it's all about the birth of the atom. The birth of physical matter. All things that exist are made of the same things. It doesn't matter what it is. They consist of the same things. In modern science, they write it down when they say that gold is a 2-8-18-18-1 or 18-32-18-1, and silver is a 2-8-18-18-1. And they tell you that these are the shells, but then they refuse to make a correlation between the fact that all these layers are just additional layers on top of the previous element. Like, every element is born from every other element. You start with one and put another layer on top of it. Now you have the next element on the periodic table. But that new layer on top is simply a layer of protons and electrons. And so to build an element is as simple as adding new layers on top. It's built just like a jawbreaker. You're putting new layers on top of the jawbreaker. But in order to build an element, you have to be able to take an element apart without destroying the parts. This is a conundrum for modern science, because every single acid, every single solvent that they use destroys every single thing that it touches. It makes it into a soup. There's no ordered disassembly. You can't take it apart and put it back together using any technique used by modern science today. Whereas if you look at the ancient Egyptian techniques, they could take the element apart and they could put it back together better than it was before. And this isn't speculation, this is fact. These things, it's, so few people even believe in any of this anymore. Is one of the reasons I don't make so many videos, because people don't really care. They don't want to hear about it. Like, why am I making videos for people that don't, and if they do, they don't even believe, I don't know. It's really disappointing, the lack of faith in the world today, because there truly is this whole world that exists. It's as if it's like a parallel universe, man. It really is, because the world of the alchemist is a world where every element can be dismantled into its layers. Each of those layers can be set aside, reassembled into that thing again, or reassembled into a new thing. And that's where the transmutation starts to come into play, because you take one element and you take it apart, and you save the layers, and then you reassemble the layers into an order of a thing that you desire. And this is where modern science starts to scoff and act like, this is ridiculous. When in reality, this is what's happening inside the volcano every single day. All day, every day, this is what's happening in the ground beneath our feet. And we don't see it obviously in front of us in that way, and so we deny it. But it's happening everywhere around us in every other part of the world. If a tree loses its leaves, those leaves become compost, not only for the tree, but also for the other plants surrounding the tree. And the laws of nature are all the same. They're universal for every aspect. And minerals are the same way. If one mineral dies, the protons and electrons from the death of that mineral are donated to the next mineral in line. It either decays down and it'll build something else up, because matter, substance, energy is never lost. It's only transferred from one thing to another. And so the principles that you see of a tree losing its leaves, the leaves become compost, the compost becomes mycelium, the mycelium becomes a mushroom, the mushroom becomes compost, which becomes food for the tree again. And now the mycelium has been reformed in a new fashion so that the tree can use it a second time. But it's not just a second, it's a continuous cycle. The pattern with the elements is identical to the pattern you see with the vegetation. Because Mother Nature is very simple in her operations. She doesn't, she's cyclical, she's consistent, she doesn't hurry, and she never stops working. And it's always the death of one thing that causes the life of another. We see it all around us. The bug dies, the spider lives, the bird eats the spider, the cat eats the bird. The cycles of nature happening before us, the cycles of decay and regrowth, regeneration and decay again, are the same with the elements. If iron and copper and carbon are decayed together, you're very likely to have gold when you're done. We live in a carbon-based universe. All of the elements are carbon-based elements. Is it not logical to think that carbon would play a large role in the work of alchemy? Food for thought. The problem is that modern science doesn't believe carbon can be altered. And it's not the carbon itself, but what's in the carbon, the components the carbon is made of. When the carbon decays, it's an entirely volatile substance. There's no solid matter left behind when it decays. It is filled with the essence of life, and when that essence is extracted, other elements grow as a result of its death. Then, as the elements continue to die and regrow and die and regrow and die and regrow again, each time they die and regrow, the essence that gets passed on has been purified just a little bit more. And it's actually, the contamination of elements is actually potassium. every time you separate an atom into its parts, there's like a ton of potassium comes out. It's unbelievable. And they call that original sin. Sin was a deity. And so all elements, because of their origination, contain potassium. It's the residue left over from their birth. And this comes out as soon as you decay the element, and it's exemplified when a human dies. If you look in the vitriolic fluid of the eyeball, the first thing to become evident is, and you can use it as a timeline, is how much potassium becomes present in the fluid, because potassium is the byproduct of decay, because all of the elements were born in it from originally with potassium. And so this dirt, as they call it, the vile earth of the stone, it gets carried on, and so it becomes what's known as the leprosy of metals. Because it destabilizes their structure at the atomic level. This is why iron falls apart and copper falls apart, like all these metals that oxidize. Once the metal has become pure enough that it doesn't have it, it's bounced one after another, over and died and reborn again enough times, then the potassium gets left behind, and it gets purified, and eventually it becomes gold and silver, because that's the result of purification. The making of gold is really it's a pitfall in alchemy, man. It's like people are so fixated on the gold that they don't recognize the fact that you're doing cold fusion. You're rearranging the atomic orbital shells of atoms and changing, like using one base orbital shells from this one and combined with the top orbital shells from that one, and making new elements from conjunctions of other elements. All of those things are way better. Like it's greed, man. It's the gold is like, man, you can do a demonstration of cold fusion in front of somebody and they'll ask you where the gold is. Show me the gold and I'll believe you, is basically what you get. But in reality, when you can build any element, gold loses its value because there's so many more things that are much more significant than gold. Seriously. The process of cold fusion in and of itself is way more valuable than gold. But these things, like, modern science has done such a good job telling everybody that it doesn't exist, that when you contradict them, you just get told that you're crazy. And the funny thing is the alchemists were actually right. They actually did succeed. And they are actually telling the truth in their books. As difficult as that may be to believe, there's a reality that exists parallel to the known reality, where atoms are fluid things, where elements are not, they're compounds, and the compounds can be intermixed and interchanged and conjoined into any possible combination that you can imagine. And that, my friend, is way more valuable than gold. May you be blessed. When the alchemists talk about gold, they're almost always not actually speaking about real gold. And the element they're talking about one of the ingredients that they need to do the work, that would be gold. Something that donates its orbital shells. They call it common gold because it's a common thing. And it's golden in color. The one thing that's absolutely, completely necessary to achieve alchemy is you have to believe. Because if you don't believe that the author is telling the truth, then you're not going to waste your time doing what he says. But if you believe what he's saying is true, then you will take the time required to understand what he's saying. Personally, I recommend Basil Valentine, Fulcanelli, Saint Germain, Flamel. With those guys, you really can't go wrong. They're true, honest masters, and they don't lead you astray. If you pay attention to what they're saying, they tell you everything you need to know. I hope you be blessed.